What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with some Detroit Lions free agency news, man. The Detroit Lions today have signed a free agent that was just released less than a week ago. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we have some Detroit Lions news to report. Now, this video is a little bit later because we kind of reacted to this live because we were just live and it happened while we were live. So I still wanted to upload a video just talking about this briefly. Again, this is not a breakdown of the player necessarily. It's just kind of reporting the news. We'll do a breakdown of this player because this is someone I kind of want to see what he looks like, what he's looked like recently. But that is that the Detroit Lions have signed offensive lineman Graham Glasgow to a 1-year, $4.5 up to $4.5 million deal. Now, we don't have the details on this contract. Okay, we'll get those at some point, but it's a 1-year deal for Graham Glasgow. Now, that name probably sounds familiar, and that's because this is a former Detroit Lion. Back in 2016, he was our third-round pick out of Michigan. He came in and played the left guard position, also mixed in a little bit at center as well for his first and second season. Then in 2018, he started to play more of the center role. By the time of 2019, his final year of his rookie deal, he was playing right guard and center. And that's something that's been the case with him throughout his entire career, is versatility on the interior. And he stepped in and played pretty well, and he's been pretty consistent. And that's what he was kind of known for coming out of Michigan, was his consistency. Well, it's weird how things work out, because heading into that 2020 offseason, the Detroit Lions decided not to bring back Graham Glasgow, a guy that had been pretty darn consistent, good on the interior, and flexible. The Lions decided not to bring him back. Why? Because they wanted to go sign an offensive tackle. Now, tackles usually cost a little bit more on the market usually, but the Detroit Lions had a hole at right tackle, and they wanted to fill that. So what did they do? They went out and signed Big V in free agency. So that year they signed Big V. They let Graham Glasgow walk. They actually signed similar types of deals. Graham Glasgow goes and signs with the Denver Broncos for 4 years, $44 million, and the Lions signed Big V to basically play right tackle. Now, unfortunately, right tackle really didn't work out greatly for Big V. It was kind of a projection. Stuck in at guard for the Lions, and last time we saw him was 2021, where he was really, really good at guard for us. I mean, he allowed 0 sacks the last time we saw him in the entire season. He had a really nice 2021. It feels like we kind of found a spot. Well, now here we are, a few years later, 2022, 6 days ago, the Denver Broncos released Graham Glasgow. Basically, in his time with the Denver Broncos, he was signed. He was a starter at right guard. He played 37 games in 3 seasons for the Denver Broncos. But it was 2021 where, due to an injury, he ended up basically losing his role. I say losing a role, but he was out because of an injury, to rookie Quinn Meinerz. I'm sure I'm saying the dude's name right. Miners. I don't remember how to say the guy's name. You know who I'm talking about. So basically, he took over at the guard position that season for Graham Glasgow. That leads us to 2022. And in 2022, he actually agreed to basically taking a pay cut, which took his cap hit from being about $14 million to just $6.1 million heading into that 2022 season. And he ultimately lost his role and did not win his role in a competition for that right guard position. And at that point, he basically just kind of became a backup center for the Denver Broncos. But he played a lot of games this past year because of a Cushenberry injury, which had him filling in at both center and right guard this past season. Now, heading into this upcoming season with Graham Glasgow, the Denver Broncos had an opportunity to save $11 million in cap space with this cut. And I guess it just kind of makes sense considering that he basically lost his starting role. Cushenberry's still under contract. The right guard position, he lost his starting role since the injury. So it made sense that the Denver Broncos would want to make this cut and open up cap space. And I don't think Graham Glasgow was necessarily happy about it. All right, he took a little bit before he actually put out his reaction to being cut. Now here come the Lions, scooping in less than a week later, signing Graham Glasgow to a 1-year up to $4.5 million deal. And isn't it funny how it works out that right after this signing is reported, the Seattle Seahawks reportedly are signing Evan Brown, the Detroit Lions last year and year before, versatile backup interior offensive lineman. It just feels like these things are always kind of tied together, similarly to what happened when we got David Montgomery, and that happened right after it was reported that Jamal Williams and the Lions were far apart on the deal. You got to believe that this is all reactions, and this is seeing things, and it's like, okay, he's not coming back. Okay, we're going to go make this move. But it's really interesting how this all ties back together to when the Detroit Lions let him go to go get Big V, and now they're both on the same team. The question becomes, is this a potential replacement? Does this mean the Lions are going to cut Big V. And that'll be something that I think I can answer better by watching some of his film and really getting a sense of what Graham Glasgow is still bringing to the table. He's a 30-year-old offensive lineman that we talked about the consistency. Last year maybe wasn't necessarily his best year, but again, early in his career played left guard. He's played right guard most recently, and he can play the center position. So you're getting that versatility. And the Lions are losing a key piece here in Evan Brown this offseason. I don't know what deal he's getting, but we're losing a key piece to a guy that had to start at right guard for the Lions this past year because of an injured Big V. So is this a replacement, versatile backup offensive lineman, or is this a potential replacement for Big V for the immediate future so that the Lions can cut him because his cap number is $12.5 million for the next 2 seasons, then potentially go in the draft and draft a future guard for the Lions? To me, at this point in time, I actually think this is more of a versatile backup for the Detroit Lions and that they will keep Big V. We talk about Big V a lot and wanting to lower his cap number because of how high it was, because he was initially signed to be an offensive tackle and moved him to guard. So for a guard payday, it's actually pretty high, and it still is. Next year it goes down a little bit because there's some bigger cap numbers like 20+ million versus his $12.5 million, but it's still pretty high. However, when you look at the Lions currently, the way that I see the situation is when you look at the holes that the Lions have already plugged now in free agency, they don't need necessarily a ton of money outside of potentially trying to go after a receiver in free agency. The Lions still would have salary cap space. We went through some of that yesterday. The Lions don't need to clear up a ton of money in free agency right now because they have to make all these moves. The Lions have plugged a lot of holes at this point in time already, and you could say probably the only position that would actually make sense that the Lions would need money to go spend on would be the receiver position, whether that's trying to re-sign DJ Chark, who reportedly is meeting with the Panthers. He's probably going to get paid this offseason, or a different receiver, maybe via trade or just signing a different receiver that's out there. But outside of that, there isn't a defensive tackle on the market, in my opinion, the biggest need for Lions, that can be that starting defensive tackle. Outside of like a prove-it deal, there isn't a guy available that's like 3 years, $50 million or something that would make sense for the Lions out there right now. There's just not there. The Lions aren't going to go spend tons of money on a backup quarterback because we kind of already know that they're going to draft one. If the Lions are going to sign a backup quarterback in free agency, which they could, they're not looking for a guy that's potentially going to be the future. That's going to be the draft. They would be looking for a guy that's just strictly a guy that can step in and get the job done when you need him to, which, yeah, it could cost a little bit, but it's not going to be super expensive. So there's really not a ton of positions that the Lions necessarily would have to clear up a whole bunch of cap space right now, which cutting Big V would clear up $6.5 million with over $5 million in dead cap. They don't necessarily need that right now, in my opinion. So I think that this is actually a versatile backup offensive lineman, which is why it kind of happened in sync with the news of Evan Brown as well, because I think that's what the Lions are replacing here with Graham Glasgow, is that versatile depth piece on the offensive line that they're missing without Evan Brown. Plus, Big V is also coming off of an injury. Now, if you want to keep Big V, and let's say his contract doesn't even change, and you kept him through the season, next year you could cut Big V, save $9.5 million, and only have just over $2 million in dead cap. So there's still that out. It's basically the same out as if you designated a post-June 1st cut and you cut Big V now. So because of where the Lions are at financially, I don't think they're stressing to open up cap space at this point in time, which to me makes it seem like this is going to be the Lions' versatile backup offensive lineman, not necessarily a replacement for Big V. If they were trying to get a pay cut done with Big V, maybe this could give them a little bit more leverage. But also, when you think about it, depending on what his cap number is, because we don't have all the details, there could be void years and things like that. But depending on what his cap number is, plus along with the dead cap that you would still be paying him, you could be looking around $10 million, $10 million if you cut Big V, and you talked about the Graham Glasgow signing, which wouldn't be too far off from what Big V's cap hit is anyway this season. But of course, there is that possibility that that could be this move, and it could lead to Big V getting cut, and then at that point, the Lions could go draft one and kind of have their stopgap. But I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. At this point in time, I think Graham Glasgow is the Lions' new versatile backup offensive lineman to replace Evan Brown, which is extremely necessary. All right, he's not a long-term option, but he's necessary because Big V is coming off of an injury. And if you look at our interior offensive line before this move, this was one of our biggest needs because the Lions had so many questions back there. They had nobody without Evan Brown under contract that you would probably feel comfortable with based on what we know so far of a guy stepping into the game and handling that position. We saw that last year. The only guy was Evan Brown. When he was out, it was a mess trying to figure out who could play guard. I mean, we were signing KO'd, right? We had different guys coming in from practice squads. We tried Logan Stenberg. We put Dan Skipper at guard. We put Dan Skipper at guard. The guy's not even under contract at this point in time with the Lions. And when you looked at who is under contract for us, it's Ross Pierschbaker, who I believe is more of a center, right? So still Graham Glasgow could be useful because he can play both guard positions, specifically right guard, which Big V's coming off an injury, and that's the one that you're probably most concerned about because everybody else has moved positions. Big V doesn't move positions. So if you think about it, without having Big V, you'd want to have a guard that could potentially back him up if he was injured or he couldn't play in the game for whatever reason. You would like to have that versatile backup piece. Since under contract only had Ross Pierschbaker, Logan Stenberg, who last season they had opportunities to go with him and they didn't, and when they did, it didn't look great. So this was one of the Lions' biggest needs. It was an under-the-radar huge need for the Lions because when we don't have it, it changes everything, and that's the most important part in my opinion, not only to the run game, which Graham Glasgow is known as a really nice run blocker over his career, but also to the pass game and just the entire offense. When you're missing a guard, it is hard to hide that. It can be very difficult to hide a guard that's really struggling. So you don't want to be in that position again. And for the Lions, I think this is a little bit, and we'll see if Big V news comes out, then hey, there you go. This could be your stopgap. You could draft someone and then you could feel pretty good about that. I thought the Lions may go that direction heading into free agency. But at this point in time, I get the sense that they're going to keep Big V around, and this is your depth backup piece that can move around, play different spots, that's essentially going to replace Evan Brown, who's probably going to get an opportunity to start. Graham Glasgow is back with the Detroit Lions now. This is pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie, just the way that this whole thing is kind of going full circle. We'll see on Big V. That's going to be the biggest question. Definitely got to watch some of his film, see where he's at. He grades out well according to Pro Football Focus, although this past season he did, according to Pro Football Focus, allow 5 sacks and had 10 penalties, which is not great. I would assume the Lions wouldn't necessarily want this guy to be their starter, but they could have him as a stopgap and then draft someone. But I really do believe this is going to be that versatile backup for the Detroit Lions at this point in time. Why? Because he was willing to take a pay cut with the Denver Broncos. So if he was willing to do that, I think he's willing to be a backup here and play that role for the Lions. And if Evan Brown understands that the Lions, or he believes that the Lions are going to keep Big V, why would he want to re-sign with the Detroit Lions if he could go somewhere else that he's probably going to have a legitimate shot to start, no matter what the deal would be this next season? If he knows that Big V's coming back, there would be no reason for him to come back if he wants an opportunity to show that he could potentially start. Now, there are 2 deals that I want to hit on here. Number 1, Will Harris has officially been re-signed by the Detroit Lions to cornerback / safety, but at this point he's become more of a cornerback for Lions. I love this. I'm a fan of Will Harris. I really want to see him continue to work at corner. And also on top of that, what we currently don't have under contract in terms of special teams players, whether that's Deshaun Elliott now, Chris Board, Josh Woods, I think his special team impact could become very important this season. Plus, again, I would love to see him continue to just develop at cornerback and see what that turns into. Obviously, this past season, he started off the year against Washington and a little bit of New England playing outside corner, and he actually played pretty well for us. It's not the most natural thing, but Washington was one of his best games of the year. 3 receptions on 6 targets, an interception in that game. Then from week 8 on, when the Lions basically took Mike Hughes out of the slot role, they put Will Harris there. Will Harris allowed 35 receptions on 49 targets, which is a 71% complete percentage, 390 yards, 2 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. But it was his communication, it was his run defense willingness, and I saw a little bit of blitzing upside as well, but I think the biggest thing was the communication, being a very smart player. It's a big reason I think Cameron Sutton can help us because he's a very smart player. You got to be smart at that spot. You got to communicate well. You can't break down his coverage, and I think there was some of that with Mike Hughes. However, Will Harris was able to do that because he's one of the smartest DBs that we have. So the Detroit Lions have brought him back. Now his deal's a little bit weird, so I'm going to try to fly through this, make the most sense of this that I can. But from my understanding, this is how I understand it. Will Harris is back with the Lions on a 1-year deal. And while he is making a guaranteed $2.582 million for the season, that's not actually the cap hit that the Lions are taking. The Lions are only taking a $1.317 million cap hit for Will Harris because of a CBA rule, which is Will Harris falling into being a 4-year veteran, which basically, according to the CBA, kind of influences NFL teams to, instead of just go the route of, hey, we're just going to get younger because we don't want to pay a depth piece, you bring these guys back because it's good for both sides. Will Harris, who is getting the base for a veteran, which is $1.08 million, plus you can also give them up to $1.35 million on top of that as a team, which works out to him making a guaranteed $2.58 million. It also makes it unlikely that he would get cut because if you cut him, you're actually losing more than keeping him. So it makes sense that you would keep him around. But for the Lions, it only counts as $1.317 million against the cap because of this rule. Amani Leo Ruarier and also Austin Bryant fell into same scenario. They could have also potentially been given this, but they did it with Will Harris because you have to be on a team for 4 seasons without any interruptions, meaning you can't have been cut and then brought back to the team. It's got to be 4 straight years and have an expiring deal, and that is the exact case here with Will Harris. So Will Harris is back, and the Lions found their own little way to make this thing work while making the cap hit super low, but also taking care of Will Harris and maxing it out of the 1.35 extra million that they were able to give him, but not actually have that count against the cap. So it's good for both sides. Happy Will Harris is back. It's great depth. It seems like he's highly a lock to make the team. I mean, it's not to say you can't get out of it. It's not like $10 million is a dead cap. It's not that, but at the same time, I really like having Will Harris on this team. And then the other deal we have is John Cominsky that we now know the details to. His I won't spend a ton of time on, but similarly to other ones, his cap number is only $2.3 million for this season. Now again, his dead cap will be $3.5 if you cut him, and you would actually again be losing money by cutting the guy, so he's probably locked in for this year, which we all assume. And his cap number jumps to $6.2 million after the season. However, again, the big thing here is that his dead cap drops really low in 2024, meaning if you cut him after this season, you would save $5 million with only $1.2 million in dead cap because of the $2.4 million prorated bonus, which is spread out amongst the 2 years. So basically, he's cheap this season on the cap number. Next year, it rises to 6.2, but if you don't want to take on that cap number, there's a pretty nice out within the deal to open up $5 million in cap space next season. So if a guy like Pascal kind of steps into that role and you're like, okay, we're good with Josh Pascal, or you draft someone, whatever that may be, or you just need the cap space, the Lions will be able to find it through Cominsky next year. However, he is still a 2-year deal, so you could keep him around, and his base salary is $5 million, so, you can always maneuver that a little bit next year too, potentially restructure, things like that because of the fact that most of its base salary next year, extend, all those things are going to be on the table, but also his cap number is low this year. The Lions have done this with a lot of deals, and for the most part, when they have a low cap number, they leave themselves an out. That way, while the cap number jumps up, they can get out of the deal if they want to, and that's exactly what they did here with John Cominsky. So, those are the updated deals that we know of, tied along with this Graham Glasgow deal. I'm going to leave it right there. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.